In the temple, I'm known as Ariel, and I am an Egyptologist, and I thought it would be interesting to explore the ways in which the ancient Egyptian concept of Maat in some ways overlaps with our ideas of the Force. And to understand Maat, we have to start at the beginning, and that means the creation myths of the ancient Egyptians. There are several. The ancient Egyptians did not have a homogeneous religion in the sense. They did have a lot of gods that most people prayed to, but even those would have had slightly different mythologies depending on the place you were at. But one of the binding principles of the various creation myths is the fact that creation came from a primeval ocean. And most importantly, this primeval ocean is a representation of chaos. And any act of creation that comes from this chaos is an act of order. So the ancient Egyptian worldview is very dualistic, but is not so much good and evil as order and chaos. And order is everything that helps maintain creation in a state of balance. What we see here are two so-called marsh bowls, and in the middle you see they have a depiction of, it's a traditional way of showing a little lake. In this case, it is supposed to show the primeval waters, and then you have various plant life coming from it. And the Egyptians thought that if you poured water in them for ritual purposes, this water would take a bit of the primal power of creation inherent in the primeval ocean. So chaos is very much a power for creation, but it is also a power that cannot maintain creation. The Egyptians also thought that the world was constantly on the brink, ready to descend back into chaos. What this world looks like, let's have a quick look at one of the most common cosmologies. Let's take the one from Heliopolis, in which out of the primeval ocean there came a lotus bloom, and from this lotus bloom, and as part of it, emerged the sun god, who first brought light and air as the two main forms of creation. There's another very similar one from Hermopolis, in which from the primeval ocean kind of divided itself into 4 pairs of basic building blocks, if you like. There's the primeval darkness, there's the primeval waters, there's the primeval air, and there's the primeval air moisture. It's complicated, and from that came all of creation. So you can see that there are parallels even when the images aren't necessarily the same. So from the sun god, spat and ejaculated 2 other gods. One of them is Shu, whom you see here in the middle. This is the god of air. And the other is the goddess Tefnut, who was the goddess of, again, primeval moisture. And they had 2 children. Geb, the earth, was masculine in ancient Egyptian mythology, and the goddess of the sky, Nut. And at this point, the gods were basically thinking that this was all very well, and it looked well, and we didn't really need any more gods. But they saw that Geb and Nut had fallen in love, so Shu separated them, thus creating the world as we know it, with the earth and the sky and the air in between. He was a bit late. Nut was already pregnant. She gave birth to other gods, and eventually other animals, plants, humans were created. Ma'a, another up, and then the T. And this is a determinative, telling us that it's a goddess, and she's wearing the little feather herself. But the whole name could also be abbreviated by just using the feather. So you're basically weighing all of your thoughts and actions during your life against the concept of pure justice and harmony. What does this entail? Fortunately, adjacent to this lovely little vignette, we have dead spell 125. And every single deceased would come up before this tribunal and would give what we Egyptologists call a negative confession. They have to state all the sins that they have not committed. And with the exception of a few that are no longer quite modern, I have not lain with men. Adultery is, of course, a question of consent and being honest with one another. And some of them are very specific to ancient Egyptian religion. But these are really very basic social norms. I have not committed robbery. I have not stolen. I have not slain. I have not uttered lies. I've made none to weep. I've not caused distress in another, which is quite a high order. I'm not a man of deceit. I've not been angry without just cause. I don't go around grumbling for every little thing. Instead, I save my anger for where it is warranted. I have not shut my ears to the words of truth. I'm not a stirrer up of strife. I have not purposefully made problems for others. I have not acted or judged with undue haste. Take the time to reflect on your actions. I wronged none. That's also a very tall order. I have never raised my voice in anger. I have not acted with evil rage. And I think we can see some echoes of the Jedi Code in here. It's interesting that this is not simply a religious morality. The heated man comes up in private morality as well. We have a series of wisdom texts from ancient Egypt in which various codes of conduct, some of them specific to certain situations, some of them quite general, are put forth for a student. And among them is the image of the heated man. The heated man talks loudly and is rude and is inconsiderate of others. And don't be like the heated man. So this is what we little humans can do to make the world a harmonious place and thus take away the chaos of social norms, the chaos of nobody knowing how to act with one another, the chaos of everybody just taking what they want and preying on the weak, etc. The problem is Maat is much more than that. Maat is the world. Maat, of course, the Egyptians had a very specific idea in terms of Maat is the fact that the Nile exists. These are Roman mosaics showing very fanciful Nile views. The Nile with all the creatures that it supports, the Nile with its temples. Temples are also very important, we will see. And for the ancient Egyptians, the world existed in cycles. There was, of course, the cycle of day and night, which needed to be maintained, and the cycle of the Nile, which used to have an inundation every year that would bring very fertile silt from the highlands of Ethiopia down and basically fertilize the fields naturally once a year. So these two cycles caused the Egyptian to have a very interesting view of time. Time is returning in the cycles of day and night and the yearly cycle of inundation, but it is also something that builds up upon what has been done before. So it is both a linear and a cyclical eternity, which is really fascinating from a philosophical point of view. And in order for Ma'at to be maintained, the cycles should not be interrupted. You need to do your best that the inundation takes place every year and that the sun continues on its path. The Aswan Haidan has done away with the inundation, but you can see on this old colored photograph that the waters really rose rather high. So how can we help to maintain this cosmic aspect of Ma'at? In ancient Egyptian religion, the king played a very important role. We can see him offering Ma'at as a little statue to the gods as a kind of pledge to do everything he can to maintain them. And in terms of what he as a pharaoh could do, he could build temples to the gods so that the gods had everything they needed to play their part in maintaining Ma'at. And he could, of course, ensure that justice was maintained in his kingdom on a purely moral level. The gods themselves needed to make sure that their rules were never impeded. This is especially important for the sun god, who was thought to travel on a bark through the sky, and every evening he would be swallowed by the goddess Nut, and inside her body is the afterlife. So souls living in the afterlife would have day when we had night. So the path of the sun was especially important for maintaining order, for fighting against chaos. And there are various visualizations of the fight against the forces of chaos. And one of them is the serpent Apep, which was thought to attack the sun god in his bark once a day. And he would need to be defeated. Here the god Seth, who generally gets pretty bad press today, was actually one of the most important gods in the Egyptian pantheon, in the sense that he was tasked to help the sun god in fighting Apep. There are also tales of a giant turtle who tries to drink all of the water of the river in the sky that the sun travels upon, and thus stop the sun in his tracks. So it was a very constant battle of all of creation, the gods, the pharaoh, and every single person, to fight against the forces of chaos. In addition to Maat, now here we see that there was a group effort in fighting chaos. However, one very specific pharaoh decided that you didn't really need all those other gods, because basically what do we need? We need air to breathe, and we need light. And the light basically takes care of everything else, makes the plants grow, because of the movement of the sun in the sky, being linked to the agricultural year and to the inundation. The sun is also in some way responsible for the water, and so we really only need one god. He called it the Aten, which was one of the many names of the sun god previously, and had it depicted as a sun disk in the sky. As I said, he got rid of all the other gods, even changed his temple architecture so that instead of having only one, well, there was always a series of altars, but altars for one statue that would have been here in the Holy of Holies, and then there would have been some offerings there, some offerings in the offering hall, and then individual statues of the gods would also have gotten offerings. Instead, there is no more statue of the god, and all of these are not closed rooms, but open courtyards filled with offering tables, 365 per courtyard, plus the big altar. So that it was thought that the god would take his offerings directly, simply by shining down on them. What's most interesting is what he wrote several hymns to his sun god. And I'm going to read just a few parts of the great hymn to the Aten. Thou dost appear beautiful on the horizon of heaven, O living Aten, he who was the first to live. Thy rays encompass the land to the very end of all thou hast made. All the beasts are satisfied with their pasture, trees and plants are verdant, birds fly from their nests, wings spread, flocks skip with their feet, and all that fly and alight live when thou hast arisen. Thou didst create the earth according to thy will, being alone, everything on earth which walks and flies on high, thy rays nourish the fields. When thou dost rise, they live and thrive for thee. Thou makest the seasons to nourish all thou hast made, the winter to cool, the heat that they may taste thee. And it goes on to describe how all the light and the air that you can see is the Aten, and how it permeates all of creation. And in this case, really all, it makes a special effort to include the lands that are not Egypt, which is rather unusual for ancient Egyptian religion. And I think at some point I'll post the hymn to the Aten on the forums, because it's really quite fascinating. Because what does it sound like? It really sounds like the force that fills us all, that binds us all, and that has love for us all. So I hope I have made you curious about the ancient Egyptian religion and philosophy. I hope that I have given you some food for thought. I am Ariel, here on the Temple Forums, and you're welcome to ask me questions at any time if you want to know more. I'm looking forward to meet most of you. I was just thinking of Bilbo, sorry. I look forward to meeting more of you, and may the Force be with you.